I'm traveling down to Washington, D.C. to visit a friend of mine for a long weekend. I decided to take the train, and more than that, two different routes with something a bit non-standard. My dad dropped me off at work and I left a bit early to take buses into Burlington. The first bus to Waterbury at one point was half full, with 6 of the 12 seats occupied. About 10 years ago, that transit agency merged into one of the two that now serve this stop. With an on-time arrival, it was a 35-minute wait for my next bus to Burlington. Fortunately, given the cold and blustery weather, I was able to wait inside and wasn't kicked out when the security guard/receptionist left. A couple employees were waiting for the bus with me. 4 seats out of the 28 on this large minibus were not occupied by humans, with the remaining carrying passengers' luggage and multiple people, including myself, carrying our bags on our laps. I rode this route frequently when I was in college, though this is the first time I've been on these buses in 5 years, and it was normally served by a bus similar to a coach bus, half full at most, running along the interstate with a few stops between Montpelier and Burlington. This transit agency, GMT, has been dealing with some funding challenges lately and is cutting routes. I spoke with another passenger who told me that he thought the large minibus was normal for this time on this route, though city buses were used at other times, though at least it continued to have Wi-Fi. The 6 minutes of delay were not a problem for me, who spent 45 minutes wandering around Burlington waiting for my friend to get out of work, but could have been if I'd wanted to take another bus out of the downtown transit center. At least it had a reasonably clean bathroom. Despite my friends living pretty close to the municipal offices and middle, high school, and an elementary school for a suburban town kind of feeding surrounding Burlington, and within a very reasonable biking distance of downtown Burlington, the closest bus stop is 3 miles away, which is pretty far. And yeah, I could have taken the bus in the morning, but I meant because of the schedules and that being like a commuter type bus, I would have had to leave at 7 o'clock in the morning from their house to walk those 3 miles for an 8 o'clock bus departure, and then wait around in Burlington for over an hour before my train. And I couldn't have really taken a bus to their house at all, not within a reasonable distance at night, because, as I said, that's a commuter schedule, but it's actually, I think, a pretty bad commuter schedule, because the last bus leaves Burlington before 5:30 at night, which, well, I got in a little bit after 5:30, scheduled for 5:30, and that just wouldn't have worked to get me here. But also many other people, like my friend who gets out of work at like 6:30, he can't take the bus here. And in the summertime, he often bikes into work, and previously, before he had a car and a driver's license and was actually living in an area with slightly better public transit access, I mean, it wasn't as far to a bus stop, and the bus was more a city bus schedule. He would often take the bus, or actually sometimes it was close enough, he'd spend time to just walk the whole way into work, or bike, of course. But it just, like, the spot where they live, in my opinion, should have better bus service than it does, because of kind of the number of services that are provided in that location. So instead, I'm going to accept a ride into work with him. He'll have to leave a little bit early for me, but that basically means he has to drive in the wintertime unless he wants to bike, which some people do in this area, but it's not great. Though it was certainly the less good choice compared to a ride from my friend. I had been planning on taking the bus so I could test out some more transit and make some urban planning points, but I did not pack clothing to be standing around in temperatures in the 20s for extended periods, which would not have been a problem given that Burlington has an indoor station, with an attendant who very helpfully advised us we should be sitting backwards at the start, as the train turns in Rutland, though some people did move seats to sit forward the whole time. Leaving Middlebury, where the platform is on the opposite side from this historic station building, I know this area well. In my first job out of college, I was involved in the construction of this tunnel, the state's most expensive construction project, one of multiple necessary to get Amtrak to Burlington. Other than getting the contractor paid, I don't think I did all that much. Other than stopping stormwater bubbling out of a decommissioned septic tank, ensuring the details of waterproofing the precast that make up this tunnel was done, and giving the state even more ammunition in making the contractor replace one of the retaining walls. So maybe I played an important part. From Whitehall, where we again start heading south, to Schenectady, there was fairly consistent work occurring on the side of the tracks. It looked like they were putting in conduit for cables, and we only see them all standing around as they have to pause work to let the train pass. It seems, from a few minutes of internet research, like this may be a new transmission line to bring Hydro-Quebec power to New York City. I'm glad I chose to wear a relatively lightweight shirt, given it's pretty hot on the train. Here in Albany, it's nice to get off the train and just get a little bit of a leg stretch break after being on that very hot train. Not everyone, but I've heard multiple other people complaining about the heat, and just like wish they could maybe turn the heat off because it's actually pretty warm weather here. Yeah, it was about freezing when we left in Burlington, but I'd hope they could adjust. The overheating improved after Albany, and I was on the sunny side, but that's half of passengers on the train. I prefer things to be cooler than warm, easier to add layers. Though there were about 20 people that got on in Burlington, and a few more in Vergennes, it actually started to feel busy in Middlebury with college students leaving early for spring break. While on the way to Albany, while some people chose to sit together, it was not necessary. A lot more people got on there and really filled up the train. 80% full was what the conductor told us our maximum occupancy would be. Certainly a little bit of risk I'm taking with this journey. So we're we're leaving here 8 minutes late of Yonkers, which is the penultimate stop before I get to New York. And I didn't book a single ticket to DC because when I was looking at the schedule, I realized that that if you booked the single ticket, you'd be on a train that left at 6:25. But there's another Northeast Regional that left at 6:06 that got you there an equivalent amount earlier, if not even a little bit more. But that wasn't bookable under a single ticket, and I understand that they expect some degree of delays, but it'd be really nice if you could just book any train. And given that the fully cancelable tickets, which I hope I'm able to do in the short space of time I have, they say they're cancelable right up until departure, which I'll have to see. Given that they're not that much more expensive, I bought one for each of the trains knowing that they'd increase in price. And so I'm hoping to catch the first train because that gets me in earlier, but I have a backup train. The real risk of this is if this train got in really late, and fortunately we got through an area of potential delays without much, and there's some track work that could have delayed us but didn't any more than we already were delayed a handful of minutes. Because if I missed both of those trains, normally if I was buying a single ticket, Amtrak would get me to DC, which there's plenty of trains that night, but now I'd have to pay for that ticket, which is rather expensive day of, is my understanding and what I saw. I'd heard these Penn Station platforms were narrow, but this feels dangerous just next to a drop-off of that size. With an on-time arrival, maybe there was schedule padding, which at the end of a line does not seem as bad. I had plenty of time to use the bathroom and enjoy some live music. Standing for half an hour was not bad given how much I had been and would be sitting, though I'd guessed the live music was an anti-busker move, and it covered up the announcements. At least they had departure screens right next to it so you could see the information on departures, and there were large areas where you could hear the announcements. I waited to cancel my second ticket until I got on the train, and due to the difficulty of Amtrak's website getting what you actually want from it, especially on a phone, I was about to cancel it when we headed under the Hudson. Fortunately, we got out soon enough that, again going through the website difficulties, I did get it canceled in time, only a couple minutes to spare. This train was a bit more full than the one into New York, with the advantage of train-specific ticketing being that you are guaranteed a seat. If I were to do this again to reduce my stress of the first train arriving late, I would get tickets for more later trains. It is only a loan now that I know that the refund works as advertised. I'm glad I did it, as the difference between arriving at 9:31 and 9:59 is rather significant for me, at a cost of $13 more. On arrival into DC Union Station, I took the metro to my friend's place. After basically taking a guess the first place I needed to make a decision, I did find signs pointing to the metro. I found the fare machines confusing as to where to start the process, as well as some of the terms, though I appreciated the pricing listed to each stop, which allowed me to perfectly estimate the total for the 3 fares I would need for the weekend. My perception is colored by some very quick arriving trains. I never had to wait more than 2 minutes for the 6 trains I was on, and the first one was arriving as I got to the platform. I had to ask a fellow passenger if it was headed in the direction I was going. Though I realize having perfect wayfinding for someone new to the system is much less important than having it work for commuters, I would have appreciated additional signage indicating the general direction of the line, north, south, east, west, not just the terminating station. I navigate using a more broad-scale map in my head rather than remembering specific information, other than the stop I needed to get off at, and with some stations not appearing to have maps on the platforms, I could not easily figure out which terminating station I wanted to head towards. On the way home, I took the Vermonter, a single train the whole way. I'd say about half full leaving DC, but increased and was completely full arriving into New York, and still fairly full up into Connecticut, even off the Northeast Corridor. The last time I was on the Northeast Corridor, 13 years ago, I found it really interesting to notice the tensioning weights to keep the wires consistently tight. Coming to the realization that using gravity was the best way to maintain the same tension, and thus nearly the same sag, with temperature changes that expand or contract the wires, was very exciting for 13-year-old me. This trip I noticed these hangers that keep the wire in place side to side do not restrict its movement up and down. The Wi-Fi was not working on either of the trains on my way down, though with some anticipation that this might happen, I made sure I had offline stuff to do, and with the views and the motion of the train, I feel like I only got about half the work done I would have been sitting at a desk. Not that 2 days at a desk would have gotten everything I had lined up done. I checked the Wi-Fi leaving DC, again not working. When I checked the next time at about the Connecticut-Massachusetts border, it was working, and I was surprised how well it worked. Only the occasional brief issue until we got into the White River Valley, where cell service became limited. Though fairly firm, the seats are a lot more comfortable than the material makes me think they would be, and wide enough to shift around and reposition. Sharing a pair of seats with a stranger, I wish there was a center armrest. Bathrooms were, though not perfect, as clean as I can expect on any form of transit, and really no complaints. My train ticket cost a total of $210, though it could have been a bit cheaper, though there is the additional cost of getting to the stations on each end, which is probably about $20, for what comparatively is a 13-hour and 15-minute trip each way door to door. The cheapest flights that would have reasonably met my criteria were $260 on the same day I booked my ticket, but add an extra $100 in the door-to-door cost, and would have been about 6 hours in transit, where I would not have done anything on a computer, though it would have allowed me almost a full extra day at work for the same trip if that was a concern. Driving would have been 10 to 10.5 hours. While this cost is the hardest for me to estimate given depreciation and wear, I guess it would cost me somewhere in the $200 to $300 range, plus dealing with my car at my friend's apartment in DC, which would have been a doable but added challenge. And, of course, it would have been much less pleasant experience given I would be driving alone. Though I never really considered anything other than taking the train, wanting to try it out. I'm not sure how often this would occur, but I did not experience significant delays, with that 8 minutes at Yonkers being the most delayed we ever were, though I did notice some inconsistency between the published PDF schedule and recent changes, such as my train leaving DC 5 minutes earlier than on that schedule, though the correct time was on my ticket. Overall, it was a good experience and probably the form of transit I would take again heading to somewhere between New York City and DC. Though the trains felt fairly empty at their northern extents, in general, I found all of these transit systems to be well used and at capacity in some cases. I was surprised by the number of passengers getting off at Montpelier, about half of the remaining on the train. Though when I think about it, there is a fairly large catchment area, and buses being the only other non-car option have some rather inconvenient schedules and or require transfers. Anyone want to leave at 3:45 a.m.?